The rain had been falling all day in Seattle, steady and cold, tapping against the windows of Olivia's quiet home. She sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea, the room filled with the soft hum of the radio. It was a Friday evening like any other, the kind she had grown used to after years of living alone. Her life was simple: teaching literature at the local high school, coming home to read in silence, and going to bed early. It wasn't that she disliked this routine, but sometimes the silence in the house felt too heavy, like it was pressing against her chest. The phone rang, breaking the quiet. It was her sister, Emily. "Olivia, I need a favor," she said quickly, her voice sounding rushed. "Ethan's internship starts next week in the city. His housing isn't ready yet, and I was wondering if he could stay with you for a while." "Just a few weeks?" Olivia blinked, surprised. Ethan, her nephew. She hadn't seen him much in the past few years. The last time she remembered, he was just a boy chasing fireflies in her backyard during summer visits, his laughter filling the night. But now Emily said he was in college, already a sophomore. Time had passed faster than Olivia realized. "I don't know," Olivia hesitated, though she already knew what her answer would be. She had a soft spot for Ethan, and she could never say no to her sister. "All right, of course. He can stay here." That evening, Olivia found herself pacing near the window, watching the streetlights reflect on the wet pavement. She wasn't sure what to expect. She pictured Ethan as a lanky boy, awkward, still carrying that shy smile. But when the knock finally came at her door, the image she held in her mind disappeared instantly. Ethan stood there, taller than she remembered, with broad shoulders and a quiet presence that caught her off guard. His dark hair was damp from the rain, and he held a small suitcase in one hand. "Hi, Aunt Olivia," he said with a smile that seemed at once familiar and entirely new. For a second, Olivia just stared, unsure what to say. Then she shook herself out of it, opening the door wider. "Ethan!" "Come in. You must be soaked." He stepped inside, his shoes squeaking slightly on the wooden floor. He looked around the house, and Olivia noticed how his eyes softened at the sight of it. "It hasn't changed much," he said, setting his bag down. "No, I suppose it hasn't," Olivia replied, closing the door behind him. She studied him quickly, trying not to make it obvious. His face still carried the boyish look she remembered, but there was something sharper now. Maturity, maybe, or just the way life had shaped him since she last saw him. She made him a cup of tea, and they sat at the table together. Conversation flowed more easily than she expected. He told her about college, how he was studying architecture, how the city both excited and overwhelmed him. She listened, smiling, occasionally asking questions, feeling strangely comforted by his presence. But as the night went on, Olivia felt something she couldn't quite name. It wasn't attraction, at least not the kind she dared to admit. It was more like awareness. She noticed the way he carried himself, how his voice had deepened, how he looked her in the eye with a steadiness that felt too grown for the boy she once knew. When Ethan excused himself to unpack in the guest room, Olivia stayed in the kitchen, staring at her half-empty cup of tea. A faint unease settled in her chest. Why did she feel nervous around her own nephew? Why did her heart seem to skip when he smiled at her? She shook her head quickly, scolding herself. "He's family. He's just a young man now, that's all. Don't be ridiculous." Still, when she walked past his room later to say goodnight, she paused at the doorway. Ethan was sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling through his phone. He looked up, caught her in the doorway, and gave her that same soft smile. "Good night, Aunt Olivia," he said warmly. "Good night, Ethan," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. She closed her bedroom door and leaned against it, her thoughts racing. Something about the evening unsettled her, though she couldn't explain it. The rain kept falling outside, and as Olivia lay in bed, listening to the steady rhythm on the roof, she realized her life was about to change in ways she hadn't expected. Ethan's presence had already stirred something inside her, something she thought had been buried long ago. She turned over, pulling the blanket tighter around herself, trying to calm her restless heart. She didn't know why she felt this way, but she did know one thing. Having Ethan under her roof would test her in ways she wasn't prepared for. And she had no idea that Ethan, though silent and polite, was noticing far more than she realized. The next morning, sunlight cut through the gray clouds spilling across Olivia's kitchen. She was already awake, sitting at the table with her notebook open, pretending to read but failing to focus. Her mind kept circling back to last night. The knock on the door, the smile that looked so much like Emily's but carried its own weight, and the strange flutter she had felt in her chest. She heard footsteps, soft and unhurried. Ethan appeared in the doorway, his hair tousled, his t-shirt wrinkled, carrying the ease of someone young who had yet to be weighed down by responsibility. "Morning, Aunt Olivia," he said, his voice still heavy with sleep. Olivia managed a smile. "Good morning. I made coffee." She pushed a mug toward him, trying to appear calm. He sat across from her, his long frame folding awkwardly into the chair. For a while they said little. He sipped his coffee, looking around as if relearning the house. "I used to sit here as a kid," he said suddenly. "I remember you'd let me draw on napkins while you graded papers." Olivia chuckled softly, caught off guard by the memory. "You had quite the imagination back then. Spaceships, castles, entire cities. I should have known you'd end up studying architecture." Ethan grinned, his eyes brightening. "I guess some things never change." That simple moment warmed her, yet beneath it was something unsettled. She had expected his presence to feel temporary, like hosting a guest who would soon be gone. Instead, there was a closeness forming, delicate but undeniable. The days unfolded quickly. Ethan settled in easily, his quiet routines blending with hers. He left his shoes by the door, washed his dishes without being asked, and joined her for dinner each night. He wasn't demanding, but his presence filled the house in a way that Olivia hadn't felt in years. It was as if the walls themselves were breathing again. One evening, Olivia found herself sitting in the living room while Ethan worked at the dining table, sketching lines and shapes across large sheets of paper. She watched him from the couch, her book resting forgotten on her lap. His focus was intense, his brow furrowed as he adjusted each line. "You look just like your mother when you concentrate," Olivia said softly. He glanced up, surprised, then smiled. "She says the same about you." The words landed heavier than she expected. She turned back to her book, though she hadn't read a single sentence in the last half hour. It wasn't what he said. It was how he looked at her, steady and warm, like she was more than just a figure in his past. The following Saturday, they drove together to pick up groceries. The city streets bustled with weekend energy, cafes spilling with people, markets alive with chatter. As Olivia parked the car, she noticed Ethan watching the world with quiet interest. "You like the city, don't you?" she asked. He nodded. "I do, but it can feel too much sometimes. Here it feels different, calmer. Being with you, it feels like I can breathe." The honesty in his tone startled her. She glanced at him, her hands tightening on the steering wheel. "That's kind of you to say." Inside the store, they moved together easily, Olivia reaching for vegetables while Ethan carried the heavier bags. At one point, she stretched for a jar on the top shelf, only for Ethan to reach above her, grabbing it with ease. Their hands brushed, a simple touch, but Olivia felt it linger like a spark. She quickly looked away, her cheeks warming. "Thank you," she murmured. "Any time," he replied, his voice calm, almost protective. Back home, Olivia found herself replaying that moment. She scolded herself for overthinking. He was simply being helpful. Still, something had shifted, subtle but impossible to ignore. That night, after dinner, a storm rolled in. Rain lashed the windows. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Olivia sat curled on the couch with a blanket while Ethan brought his sketches into the living room. He spread them across the coffee table, explaining his designs. "This one," he said, pointing to a rough drawing of a small house. "I imagine it by a lake. Big windows, quiet surroundings, a place to breathe." Olivia leaned closer, her eyes tracing the lines. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Their shoulders nearly touched, and for a moment the storm outside faded. Olivia felt the warmth of his presence, the nearness of someone who saw her not just as an aunt, but as a person. a woman whose life still held depth. Ethan glanced at her then, his eyes lingering longer than they should have. He didn't speak, but Olivia felt the silence between them carry words unspoken. She pulled back slightly, tucking the blanket tighter around her. "You should get some rest," she said gently, her voice steady though her heart raced. He studied her for a beat, then nodded. "Good night, Aunt Olivia." When he left the room, Olivia exhaled deeply, realizing she had been holding her breath. She pressed her hand against her chest, confused by the feelings stirring inside her. She had always prided herself on control, on composure. But with Ethan in her home, control seemed to slip away more easily than she wanted to admit. That night in bed, she lay awake, listening to the storm fade. Every thought seemed to circle back to him. The way he smiled, the way he listened, the way his presence softened the loneliness she had carried for so long. She told herself it was just gratitude, nothing more. He was family, and she was simply touched by his kindness. But deep down, she knew the truth wasn't so simple. And as she drifted into restless sleep, she couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan, too, was carrying thoughts he hadn't yet dared to speak. The morning after the storm, the air was fresh, the ground damp, and the world seemed washed clean. Olivia stood by the kitchen window, sipping her coffee, when she heard Ethan coming down the stairs. He looked rested, but his gaze lingered on, her longer than usual, as if he was studying her in ways she couldn't name. They ate breakfast quietly, the rhythm between them calm, yet charged. Olivia tried to focus on the ordinary details, the eggs, the toast, the smell of fresh coffee. But underneath, she felt a current pulling at her. It wasn't just that Ethan was her nephew. It was that he had stepped into her life at a time when she thought she was done being seen, really seen, and now she couldn't ignore how alive she felt in his presence. Later that day, Ethan offered to help in the garden. Olivia handed him gloves and clippers, watching as he worked with ease. The sun lit his face, and for a fleeting second, she saw not her sister's son, but a man, thoughtful and steady. When he caught her looking, he grinned. "You always had the nicest yard," he said. "When I was little, I thought it looked like something out of a storybook." Olivia smiled faintly. "That's because you only saw the flowers. You didn't see how many weeds I pulled to keep it that way." Ethan laughed, the sound warm, and for a moment, it felt like time folded in on itself. Her younger self, his childhood, and this present moment all blending into something she couldn't explain. That evening, they sat together on the porch. The air was cool, and fireflies blinked across the yard. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his arms resting loosely at his sides, his voice quiet when he spoke. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course," Olivia replied, her tone light, though her heart picked up speed. "Did you ever regret not marrying again?" The question caught her off guard. She looked out at the yard, the silence stretching before she answered. "Sometimes. But mostly, I think I just got used to being alone. It was safer." "Safer," Ethan repeated, as if weighing the word. His gaze stayed on her, steady, almost searching. But safe isn't always the same as living. The way he said it, low and certain, struck something deep inside her. She couldn't bring herself to meet his eyes. Instead, she folded her hands in her lap and whispered, "You sound older than your years." "Maybe," he said softly, "or maybe I just see things more clearly now." The air between them thickened, filled with unsaid truths. Olivia shifted in her chair, suddenly aware of how close they were, how easy it would be to lean just a little closer. But she stayed still, her chest tight, her mind warning her of lines she should never cross. The following day, Emily called. Olivia put her on speaker while she prepared lunch, and Ethan joined in the conversation, his voice light, his laughter filling the room. But as Olivia listened, she noticed something else. How naturally he spoke with her. How his comfort here seemed to deepen each day. When the call ended, Ethan turned to her, his expression softer than before. "You've always been the steady one," he said. "Even when Mom couldn't, you were there. I don't think I ever told you how much that meant." Olivia's throat tightened. She busied herself with the food, but his words lingered. Gratitude, affection, and something more hovered between them, unspoken but heavy. That night, Olivia found herself restless again. She wandered into the living room, where Ethan was sketching under the lamplight. His drawings sprawled across the table, delicate lines forming homes that seemed filled with hope. "Can I see?" she asked. He nodded, sliding one toward her. "This one's different," he said. "It's not just a house. It's kind of how I imagine home should feel." Olivia traced the lines with her eyes. "It feels alive," she murmured. He leaned closer, his voice quiet. "That's because of who I imagined inside it." The words hung in the air, trembling on the edge of meaning. Olivia looked at him then, really looked, and in his eyes, she saw no hesitation. She felt her breath catch, her pulse quickening, but fear and longing tangled inside her. She pushed the paper back gently. "You're very talented," she said, her voice steady though her hands trembled. He studied her for a moment, then nodded, respecting the boundary she had just drawn. But even as he leaned back, Olivia knew he had stepped closer to something that could no longer be ignored. The next day they went into town again. At a cafe, Ethan insisted on paying for their drinks. As they sat across from each other, people around them chatted, laughed, and carried on with their lives. To anyone passing by, they might have looked like any pair, two people sharing coffee. But Olivia felt the weight of every glance, every pause, every silence. "You're quiet today," Ethan said gently. "I just have a lot on my mind," she admitted. "About me?" he asked, his voice calm but direct. She froze, startled by his courage. He didn't press, but his question lingered, forcing her to face the truth she had tried to avoid. That evening, back at the house, Olivia stepped outside to clear her thoughts. The stars stretched endlessly above her, the cool night air wrapping around her like a cloak. She heard the door open and close softly, then Ethan's footsteps beside her. "You don't have to be afraid," he said quietly. She turned to him, her chest tightening. "I'm not afraid of you." "Then what?" His eyes searched hers, not demanding but patient. "I'm afraid of myself," she whispered. Ethan didn't move closer, but his presence was steady, grounding. "You don't have to carry everything alone," he said. "Not anymore." His words pierced her, a mixture of comfort and temptation. She wanted to believe him, to let go, to stop pretending. But she also knew how complicated everything was. Their family ties, the unspoken rules, the line she had promised herself she would never cross. As they stood there in the quiet night, Olivia realized that something had shifted beyond return. The question was no longer if feelings existed, but what they would do with them. And for the first time, she didn't know if she was strong enough to keep pretending nothing was there. The days after that starlit night felt heavier, each moment charged with words Olivia and Ethan didn't dare speak aloud. Their routines remained the same: coffee in the morning, quiet meals, evenings with books or sketches. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. Every glance seemed to last too long, every silence too thick, every casual touch carrying weight neither of them could ignore. Olivia told herself it was nothing. She had lived a life of discipline and restraint, a life where feelings stayed locked away. But Ethan's presence kept unraveling her defenses. She found herself watching him when she shouldn't. His thoughtful expression as he worked, the warmth in his laughter, the way he carried a calm that made her forget her loneliness. And each time she caught herself, she scolded her heart, but it never listened. One afternoon, while Olivia prepared lunch, she heard Ethan humming in the living room. It was a tune she didn't recognize, soft and unguarded, She peeked in and saw him sprawled on the couch, sketchbook in hand, completely at ease. For a brief second, she imagined her life always filled with this kind of simple companionship. The thought made her chest ache with both hope and guilt. When she carried the food in, Ethan looked up and smiled. "You didn't have to do all this," he said. Olivia set the plates down, steadying her voice. "It's nothing. Your family," the word family lingered between them, sharp and undeniable. Ethan didn't argue, but his eyes told her something else, something she wasn't ready to face. Later that week, Emily called again. Olivia placed the phone on the counter while chopping vegetables. Ethan leaned against the doorway, listening as his mother talked about her job, her friends, and the never-ending responsibilities of daily life. Olivia tried to focus on Emily's voice, but her awareness of Ethan's presence filled the room more than the conversation itself. When the call ended, Ethan walked over, his tone gentle. "She worries about you, you know," he said. Olivia frowned. "Me? Why?" "Because she thinks you've closed yourself off from happiness. She wishes you'd let someone in." The words hit her harder than she expected. She set the knife down, her hand suddenly unsteady. "And what do you think?" Ethan met her eyes, his voice quiet but firm. "I think she's right." The intensity of his gaze forced Olivia to turn away. She busied herself with the cutting board, her heart pounding. She knew he wasn't speaking in vague terms. He was speaking about her and him, about the space between them that grew smaller each day. That night, Olivia sat alone on the porch, trying to breathe through the confusion swirling inside her. The stars stretched endlessly above, but even their vastness couldn't quiet her thoughts. She didn't hear Ethan approach until he was beside her, his presence calm, steady, familiar. "You've been distant," he said softly. Olivia forced a smile. "I've just been thinking." "About us?" His question was direct, yet his voice carried no pressure, only honesty. Olivia's breath caught. She wanted to deny it, to deflect, but the truth pressed too heavily on her chest. She turned to him, her eyes searching his face. "This, whatever this is, it can't happen." He didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned back, his tone even. "I know what the world would say, but I also know what I feel when I'm here, with you." His words shook her. She stared at him, torn between fear and longing. She whispered almost to herself, "Ethan, you don't understand. I've spent my life avoiding risks. I can't—" "You can," he interrupted gently. "You just won't." The firmness in his voice left her silent. She wanted to argue, but he wasn't wrong. She had built her life on caution, on careful steps. Yet here was someone who saw through it all, someone who made her wonder if she had mistaken safety for emptiness. The days that followed carried the same quiet intensity. They cooked together, shared small jokes, went for walks, all while dancing around the growing truth. Each moment felt like standing on the edge of something vast and unknown, and Olivia didn't know if she was strong enough to step forward. One evening, as they washed dishes side by side, their hands brushed again. It was such a small touch, accidental, but Olivia felt it like a spark. She glanced up, meeting his eyes, and in that moment, neither of them looked away. The silence stretched, filled with everything unspoken. Olivia's chest tightened, her heart racing. She wanted to pull back, to restore the boundary, but she couldn't. Her hand lingered in his, the warmth undeniable. Finally, she whispered, her voice breaking, "Ethan, please. Don't make this harder." He didn't let go, but he didn't push either. "I'm not trying to make it harder. I just don't want you to keep pretending you don't feel it too." Her throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, to protect them both from what it meant, but the truth pressed too close. She pulled her hand away, retreating into the safety of silence. That night, she lay awake again, her mind racing. She thought of Emily, of family, of the line she had always sworn she wouldn't cross. And yet she thought of Ethan, too. His kindness, his steadiness, his quiet patience. The battle inside her tore her apart. The following afternoon, Olivia decided she needed distance. She packed a bag, telling Ethan she was going to spend the night at a friend's. He looked at her, his expression unreadable, but he didn't stop her. On the drive, Olivia's chest ached. She told herself she was doing the right thing, creating space before something happened that couldn't be undone. But as she stared at the empty road ahead, she realized the truth she had been avoiding. Leaving didn't make her feelings disappear. It only made her confront how deeply they had taken root. Back at the house, Ethan sat alone in the living room, her absence louder than silence. He glanced at the empty chair across from him, the blanket she always used, the faint scent of her perfume in the air. He leaned back, closing his eyes, and whispered to himself, "She feels it too. I know she does." Both of them, apart but connected, wrestled with the same truth. The line was still there, bold and unbroken. But with each passing day, it felt closer, thinner, and harder to keep intact. And deep down, Olivia feared the moment when she might finally step across it. Olivia didn't sleep at her friend's house. She lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling as the night stretched endlessly. The clock ticked, her thoughts spun, and every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan, his eyes searching hers, his words echoing in her heart. She had run away to escape the tension, but all she had found was emptiness. By morning, Olivia was exhausted, but her heart was clear. She couldn't hide anymore. She couldn't live in the shadows of what if and maybe. Something inside her had shifted forever, and no matter how hard she tried to stay guarded, her feelings were no longer a secret to herself. She drove back to the house early. The quiet neighborhood was still waking up, golden light spilling across the lawns. Her hands gripped the wheel tightly, her chest heavy with both fear and determination. She parked in the driveway and sat for a long moment, staring at the front door. Finally, she forced herself to move. When she stepped inside, she found Ethan in the kitchen pouring coffee. He looked up, surprised, but didn't speak right away. The silence between them was thick, almost unbearable. "You're back early," he said finally, his voice calm, though his eyes betrayed the questions he didn't ask. Olivia nodded, setting her bag down. "I couldn't stay away." That simple admission hung in the air, heavier than any confession. Ethan studied her, waiting, his patience steady as always. Olivia walked closer, her steps uncertain, her heart racing. "I thought leaving would make it easier," she whispered. "But all it did was show me how much I can't ignore this anymore." Ethan's breath caught. He set the mug aside, his full attention on her. "You mean us?" Her throat tightened, but she nodded. "Yes, us." For a long moment, neither moved. The house was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock. Olivia's chest ached with the weight of her words. She didn't know what would come next. Judgment, regret, or release. Finally, Ethan stepped closer. His voice was steady, low. "I don't want to push you. I never did. But I need you to know, I've felt it too, every moment. And I don't want to pretend anymore." The honesty in his words broke through the last of her defenses. Tears filled Olivia's eyes, though she wasn't sure if they were from relief or fear. She whispered, almost trembling, "Ethan, this isn't simple." "It never will be, I know," he said softly. "But simple doesn't always mean right, and hard doesn't always mean wrong." His words struck something deep inside her, something she had buried under years of restraint. For the first time, she allowed herself to admit it. She wanted him. Not just as comfort, not just as company, but as something more, something real. Olivia turned away, pacing, trying to steady her racing heart. What would people say? What would your mother think? Ethan walked closer but kept his distance respectful, his voice firm but gentle. People will always talk. Mom will always worry. But at the end of the day, it's our lives, and I'd rather live with the truth than hide behind silence. His words were like a key, unlocking the cage she had built around herself for years. She stopped pacing, turning to him, her eyes wet but fierce. "Do you understand what you're asking? Once we step into this, there's no going back." He met her gaze without hesitation. "I don't want to go back." The strength in his voice shattered her fear. Olivia felt the weight of her loneliness, the years she had spent keeping her heart safe but empty. For the first time in so long, she felt alive. Trembling, she whispered, "Then neither do I." In that moment, the walls between them crumbled. Ethan reached for her, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Their hands met first, a simple touch, warm and grounding. Then he pulled her gently into his arms, and she let herself lean into him, her tears falling freely. It wasn't a perfect embrace. It was messy, filled with years of hesitation and longing, but it was real. For the first time, Olivia allowed herself to feel without fear. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in silence, their hearts beating in sync. When she finally pulled back, Olivia laughed softly through her tears. "We're really doing this, aren't we?" Ethan smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Only if you want to." "I do," she whispered. "More than anything." From that moment, something shifted between them. The house no longer felt heavy with unspoken words. It felt alive, filled with a quiet hope. Their days carried the same routines: meals, conversations, walks. But now there was no wall dividing them. Their connection wasn't hidden anymore. It was theirs to share, not theirs to fight. When Emily called later that week, Olivia felt a pang of fear, but also a strange calm. She and Ethan shared a glance across the room, unspoken understanding passing between them. They weren't ready to tell anyone yet, but for the first time, Olivia didn't feel like she was lying to herself. After the call, Ethan came and sat beside her. "We don't have to rush," he said. "We'll figure this out together." And for the first time, Olivia believed it. She wasn't alone anymore. The nights grew warmer, and so did the bond between them. They shared more than glances now. Long conversations about dreams, quiet laughter over small things, the comfort of simply being near each other. Olivia often wondered if it was fragile, if the world outside would ever accept it. But each time doubt crept in, Ethan reminded her with his steady presence that love, even complicated love, was still love. One evening, they sat on the porch again, the stars stretching endlessly above. Olivia leaned her head against his shoulder, the peace she had once thought impossible now resting in her chest. "Do you ever think about the future?" she asked softly. "All the time," he replied. "But I don't need to know every answer right now. I just need to know you'll be there." She smiled, closing her eyes. "I will." The night carried their quiet promise, wrapping them in a blanket of stars. Olivia no longer feared the unknown. For the first time in years, she wasn't hiding, wasn't running, wasn't trapped by silence. She was living, fully, vulnerably, bravely. And as she sat beside Ethan, her heart knew with certainty, love, no matter how complicated, was worth the risk.